What is up, everyone? I'm Ryan from Fireside Knicks with my friend and co-host Dylan Backer. And, unfortunately, this is the last post-game kind of thing of the season, right? The Knicks dropped Game 6. It was a competitive game. They got off to an electric start. You're thinking, all right, they might actually do this. They might actually force a Game 7. And they were just incapable of keeping the foot on the gas pedal for the rest of the game. Kind of a microcosm of the entire series. They weren't able to generate consistent offense. And they got sent home, right? End of the day, when you struggle to shoot from three, when you fail to get consistent offense from everyone not named Jalen Brunson, and when you are in a situation where you're trying to win these defensive matchups with the Miami Heat, that's a team that's been here before. That's a team that's been through these type of postseason series before. They're just a more experienced team, and they showed it. They got the job done. They were understaffed as well. I know we didn't have we don't know the extent of Julius Randle's injury situation. Emmanuel quickly was out for games. Grimes missed some time and had some shoulder issues. But Miami was not fully healthy either. So they just flat out beat the Knicks, right? Obviously a disappointing end to the season, but certainly a great season for the Knicks. Dylan, first off, how are you doing today, my friend? And secondly, tell me a little bit about Game 6 and where your mindset is right now, following the end of the season.
Right, so had a few days to kind of settle in the losing of Game 6 and getting eliminated, so now we're here talking about it, Just to kind of recap Game 6, it was basically all just Jalen Brunson. He had been phenomenal all postseason, and he pretty much had his best game in Game 6. Unfortunately, it didn't result in a win. 41 points, 3 assists, 4 rebounds, 14 and 22 from the field. You couldn't have asked more out of the guy. Unfortunately, the rest of the guys just did not do enough. The next highest scorer was Randle, who had only 15 points, and he shot 3 of 14. RJ Barrett went 1 of 10. Kind of it was the story all postseason, It was basically Jalen Brunson doing a lot of the work, and the other guys just kind of took a step back. Maybe not RJ Barrett, but RJ Barrett obviously didn't perform well in Game 6, but every other game RJ played decent, but looking at that, it was mostly just kind of the story right there. Brunson played great, elevated his game in the playoffs for the second year in a row, this time with us instead of Dallas, but the rest of the guys, it took a step back, and you're not going to win many postseason games doing that. And unfortunately, it ended here in the second round to an 8 seed, which is unfortunate. But like you just said, still an incredible playoff run. They weren't even expected to make the playoffs, nevertheless make the second round, nevertheless also make the 5th seed, so still rather a really good successful season for the Knicks. It's unfortunate it didn't result in a championship or at least an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. But this team is set up. They have a bunch of draft picks to move around. They got a few assets on the roster such as Evan Fournier and Derrick Rose to move as well. So they got things to work with here, and they got some leverage to use here, and they can make some good moves and hopefully improve this roster a lot more and add some much-needed shooting in the offseason to get an even deeper run next season. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, the Knicks are in an excellent position, in my opinion, following this series ending, right? They have a plethora of picks. They aren't in cap hell or anything like that. Yes, they have some pretty big contracts, but, you think of the bad ones, Fournier, that one's going to end, I think, after next year because it's an option for the 4th year. Your big contracts are Barrett, Randle, and Brunson, right? And those are kind of the 3 guys that you would look on paper and say, all right, those guys having the biggest contracts makes some sense, right? Looking forward, they're not in a bad spot in the slightest, right? You feel like this team is if they can make the right moves, if they can add some shooting, if they can add some depth, they'll get better. You'll get another year of guys like Quickly and Grimes. You'll still have Brunson there. You'll still have Randle there. Obviously you'll still have Barrett there. Whether he will be here or not, depends on what becomes available in the offseason. I guess you could say the same about Randle. But you kind of know what you have. You kind of know what you are. You know what your identity is. I think it was a big year for guys like Tom Thibodeau, who, I don't think was ever necessarily entering the season on the hot seat, but certainly at times during the season, there was pressure from fans and from people to potentially fire him or to look for another head coaching guy. It gives him another year. I think it gives the front office another year. I think it gives them a shot to reevaluate, and I think it gives them some sort of direction. If you're Leon Rose, you look at the process and his thought process and his plans for this roster and this organization. He's starting to see, fruit bear from what he's been trying to do for the last couple of years. That's definitely encouraging for the front office. Again, they're in a position where whenever a star player becomes available, they can go out and get them, right? Interestingly enough, when, yes, people will say, well, they missed on Donovan Mitchell. But, is Donovan Mitchell, if you added Donovan Mitchell to this team right now, given what you would have to subtract, would they have gotten to the NBA Finals? I don't think so, right? I don't think they would have been in a position to beat the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series. Not impossible, but certainly not the likely outcome. And if you look at the cap situation, what picks do they have to really get that much better entering next season, right? You unloaded all your picks for Donovan Mitchell. I'm not saying the Mitchell trade has been bad for them. They needed a guy like Donovan Mitchell. But the Leon Rose's very careful approach and very, I have to wait for the guy to make that trade for, I think is proving to be the right decision, right? The Knicks have a really high ceiling relative to a team that's not a finals contender, without necessarily unloading all those picks, right? They got their guy in Jalen Brunson with a $100 and something million contract, right? Like the 50th highest AAV amongst all NBA players currently, right? Like they're paying him top 50 NBA money, like not even close to, got other point guards who you would consider on his level. So I think contractually, picks-wise, everything looks good for the Knicks. It's just a matter of adding what they need, and I think the big thing in this series is evident of it is shooting. What are your thoughts on the Knicks spacing situation? How do you feel about that, and do you agree with me that that's kind of the priority at this point?
Right. Shooting is undoubtedly the priority at this point. That was clearly like their one major flaw all postseason. It was a big flaw during the regular season, of course, too, but it really kind of started to really show in the postseason. You're not going to win playoff games if you can't shoot. It's as simple as that. Miami didn't even have an amazing series themselves. I wouldn't even necessarily say Miami beat us. I would say that we kind of just beat ourselves. The Knicks kind of just shot themselves out of these games. Consistently shooting like below 30% from three. A lot of guys taking bad shots, inefficiency. Everyone was not hitting their shots. Nothing was going. You would think maybe after one decent shooting game they would start to get going, but then they'd take a step back and continue to go back to shooting like 20% from three. That's not going to cut it. There's a lot of guys on the floor. You have to kind of surround, Brunson and Randall and these guys with other players that, teams are going to have to respect from three. When you have guys like Quentin Grimes is obviously their best shooting option, but when he's not shooting the ball well, teams aren't going to respect him as much. And when your other options are RJ Barrett, who's not a very good 3-point shooter, Josh Hart, who is a solid 3-point shooter but doesn't take a lot of them, and then Obi Toppin. When those are your best shooters in that kind of order, that's not really a good thing. You need to find guys that, especially in the wing spots, that can shoot the ball very, very good and on a very good high level. Some guys that come into mind, maybe like Cam Johnson, who's a free agent. You could go after someone like that. We're not going to speculate too much into the offseason just yet, but it's time. It is time to start thinking about it because it is clear that the main issue was shooting. Right? If they could just shoot the ball a little better in some of these games, we could be sitting here right now talking about previewing Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals for the Knicks. But unfortunately, we aren't. So we just have to look at what this roster looks like right now and see what adjustments have to be made, because clearly there are adjustments that have to be made. But we're in a good spot because, we got a bit ahead of schedule, making the second round already in the first year of having Jalen Brunson. Brunson kind of blossomed into a star throughout the regular season and then really shined in the postseason. So now we can almost undoubtedly say he's probably a top 5 point guard in the NBA. I can comfortably say that. I don't know if you can, but I definitely can say that at this point. At this point, I think he's pretty much earned all of his respect. He pretty much, this second year in a row now that Brunson has shined in the postseason, and then he does it in the first year with the Knicks, pretty much elevated this Knicks team into, I wouldn't go as far as say finals contender just yet, but they're a respectable playoff team, a playoff team that you have to take seriously, so just looking at that, I think it's just, a matter of surrounding these guys with the right pieces. I'm not saying all these pieces are necessarily bad fits. It's just, there's clearly needs to be some tweaks and some adjustments. And I do think shooting is the main priority. So that's kind of my thought on it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, as you mentioned, Jalen Brunson wasn't just good in the postseason. He was one of the best players and one of the best scorers in the postseason. And we were talking about this a little bit before we recorded. It's hard to find playoff risers, right? Typically, guys become less efficient in the postseason. They're seeing better defensive coverages. They're playing against higher quality competition. You're not going to have, hey, let me go feast on the Charlotte Hornets for a game here or there. You're facing these elite level teams, typically some of the best defenses in the NBA. Rarely do you see the best defense in the NBA not make the postseason, right? So if you're Jalen Brunson, you can't look at it and say anything other than this guy has been everything the Knicks have wanted and more, right? He's truly elevated this team to another level, and they feel like they're one star away, or they're a little bit better shooting away, at least from getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, but maybe a wing type guy, maybe they're that away from going out and being a finals contender, right? This team is really good, right? This team was really good this year. This team made adjustments, they made changes, they were able to get slightly better. It does suck that, if you look at what this team was when Josh Hart first got here, that type of team probably would have won this series, but they just didn't play to that talent level. The talent on the roster never changed between now and, March, but the performance did. That's really what it comes down to. But as you mentioned, we're not going to speculate too much on who those guys could be right now because, we're not even done with the regular season or the postseason, right? Like, yesterday we could have said, what could the Knicks potentially look at a Jaylen Brown type? Well, the Celtics are about to go into the Eastern Conference Finals, potentially win it, and go to the finals. Do they want to start moving pieces or, thinking about separating that duo when they could have their second finals berth in 2 years with that duo? Not necessarily. Now, do you look at the 76ers? Maybe, but even then, I have no idea what that's going to look like. We're not even 24 hours removed from their elimination, so what they will do, what they'll choose to do, how they'll choose to react to this is up in the air. But all we can control is what, is currently available for us for the Knicks. All the Knicks can control is what they do in free agency, how they choose to, navigate with this roster, but they're certainly encouraging pieces. I guess a question I have for you is looking into next year, like who's that, like Emmanuel Quickly, not that he took a massive leap from year 2 to 3 as in like he was like bad to good, but he went from a solid player to a really good player, right? I think solid's underselling. He was a good player and he became an even better player, right? Who's that guy that you think, they've shown some flashes of being able to perform at a higher level? Who do you think could take, a big step in their game next year and become kind of like a surprise contributor for the Knicks that's currently on the roster right now?
Right, so, a surprise contributor, it would probably be Emmanuel Quickly, considering how much he elevated his game a little bit and kind of jolted himself into the six-man conversation this season. He finished as the runner-up, actually, so I definitely think he can become that quote-unquote surprise contributor. Hopefully he can, elevate to maybe a 16-point per game season even, which would be phenomenal off the bench, right? But even if he were to possibly get inserted into the starting lineup, there is that possibility that does arise because we have seen Quickly be able to play the point guard and shooting guard. So that's a possibility as well. So even if that happens, maybe we could end up seeing him average more points. It's definitely going to be a big year for him because pretty soon Quickly is going to want to get paid, and the Knicks are going to have to make a decision about that, whether they choose to pay Quickly to keep him around or look after somebody else to kind of replace him in a way. Those are decisions we haven't, that are obviously not going to be made right now, but those are decisions that are going to have to be made at some point. So this would definitely be a big year for Quickly in that regard. And another guy I want to mention RJ here. And you may be surprised a little bit that I'm mentioning RJ, who's supposed to be like the main guy at the big three. But, we all know he had a down year this year. We all know that. And the regular season it wasn't the best regular season we've seen out of RJ. Very inefficient, very topsy-turvy, up and down season. He really showed up in the playoffs, though. After the first 2 games of this postseason, it looked like he was just going to continue to regress. He really stepped up, and he became like that playoff guy, that playoff performer that we were hoping we could develop, Obviously, we had Jalen Brunson around, but, Brunson was already a known playoff performer, so you kind of knew what you were going to get out of him. Obviously, Brunson played even better this year in the playoffs than last year, but I think the point still stands. But with RJ, he really stepped up in this postseason. I think he kind of showed, he can be a massive contributor to this team for a very long time if he can continue to do that. At the end of the day, if you make the playoffs, all you really want to do is just see these guys step up in that postseason, right? There's a big difference between performing well in the regular season and performing well in the playoffs. You can perform great in the regular season all you want, but if you take a step back in the playoffs, you're not going to get as much credit for what you did in the regular season because at the end of the day, it's just the regular season. The playoffs is where everything matters. That's where you win championships. That's where you get all that stuff, right? So seeing what RJ did this postseason was just very encouraging. Obviously he didn't have a good Game 6. I'm not just going to point the finger at him, though, because, everybody except Jalen Brunson had a bad Game 6. So I'm not going to, just rag on him about that. Every other game except Game 6, he was great. He was way more aggressive. He was actually getting to the paint. He wasn't, he was still shooting a bit of threes, and I'm kind of iffy on that because, we all know he's not really a great shooter. If he can improve his three-point shot in the offseason and become a really good shooter next season, that would be great. But for the way I see it, RJ needs to just stick to his strength. keep going to the basket, keep getting your points inside. He needs to realize he's a lot stronger than everybody else on the court, or most of the people on the court at least. He needs to take that to his advantage. And I think we kind of saw that this postseason. He stepped up. And, usually when he doesn't play well, he owns up to it and knows he needs to make an adjustment, and he does. And I really admire that. I admire that kind of work ethic. So I really do think RJ is in line to have a bigger, much better next season. I think this playoff run kind of gave him a little confidence a little bit that he really can step up. So I'm really hoping that next season he can take that even bigger leap than he did, last season when he really went off in the second half. I'm hoping he can make that become a season-long thing, not just a second half thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I wonder what the future for RJ Barrett with the Knicks looks like, right? Couple of things. Number one, anyone with a big contract not named Jalen Brunson is going to be on a trade block just because of how the NBA works with salary fillers and all of that. But also, if you're the Knicks and you're looking for a wing, right, you have your 3 spot looks pretty open, right? Like, you're not going to complain if you go from RJ Barrett to another wing, considering the performance last year and just kind of the questions about whether you can have RJ, Randall, and Brunson all at the court at the same time, succeeding in similar at the same time, right? We see that typically it's either Randall's out of lineup or not playing well, and that's when Barrett plays well. And not to say that they're, that not that you don't like each other, it's that, like, whether you like each other or not has nothing to do with your synergy on the court, right? Certain players just don't play well together. I wonder if that creates any sort of buzz at all. But I don't know how good RJ Barrett will be next year. I think a lot of that depends on defense and 3-point shooting, which are 2 variables that, defense is one of those things where it's like, how do you go from a solid defender to a bad defender, then back to a good defender? I'm not an NBA coach, so I'm not necessarily sure what the game plan is for RJ Barrett there, though I'm sure the Knicks and Barrett will look at that all off season. It's just the little things, it feels like, right? The little things have to just be better for RJ Barrett. The talent is still there. He's still a player he was, in terms of he's still the person he was 2 years ago. He's still, it's not like he's had a major life altering injury or anything of the sort that has changed his caliber of play. He is still the same person he was. Everything's still intact. I wonder what changes they're going to have to make in the offseason to have him be a better defender, because if he repeats a season like this next year, there are going to be no question marks about what they're going to have to do, because at this point, right, he had a good postseason. You hope that carries over, but we're now in year 5 of RJ Barrett, and we're not sure what type of player he is just yet. So year 4 kind of felt like the year where you had to figure it out. Year 5 is definitely the year you have to figure this out. But for a guy that I think can take a big leap next year, I was also hinting at this before the episode, Miles McBride, right? I am a Miles McBride guy, and I think that, not saying he's gonna take the Emmanuel Quickley leap, go from solid bench player to a 6th man of the year candidate, but I think he can go from, hey, if he can find his 3-point shot, he was not a bad shooter in college, so it's not like this is a career-long thing. If he can find his shot, shoot like 35 to 36% from 3. If he can do that with his defense, he's already, statistically speaking, a net positive for the Knicks. If you look at like on-off and net rating, I know that he makes the offense worse, but if you put him in that second unit and he has Quickly and Hart, and he's, let's say, the point guard or the shooting guard, I don't really know. I mean, NBA positions are pretty, transparent here. But if he's, running the point, if he's, allowed to be a playmaker, but more importantly, just be the primary defensive option for that second unit and become an option potentially in certain closing lineups if need be, I think he can totally do that. I don't think that's out of the cards or out of the realm of possibility for McBride. He's still pretty young. He just needs to find a 3-point shot. The defensive value is there. I still think overall he's a net positive for the Knicks. I think that the Knicks are better with him than without him. But I do think he's a player that you can look at next year, get the 3-point percentage up, become not an offensive positive, but not an offensive detriment, right? Just be okay, just be good enough that the Knicks don't take a significant drop off with you on the court. And I think you can see Miles McBride become a regular contributor for this Knicks team and kind of another one of those fun young players. The Knicks have drafted really well, so I also trust them to take a guy they've drafted and get the most out of them. But another guy I could think that would be interesting is like Quentin Grimes. Like, what do you think about Quentin Grimes looking into next year, right? This will be his 3rd year in the league. He took a pretty big leap from first year to this year. He takes on really difficult defensive matchups, right? We know that he has talent as a scorer, as a finisher, as more than just a 3-and-D guy. What do you think year 3 looks like for Quentin Grimes, and how important is it for him to take another step?
Right, so I mean, Quentin Grimes, big year coming up. I mean, he took a big leap this year. He averaged nearly 12 points and he shot 40% from 3. He got inserted into the starting lineup about early on in the season. Like I think it was like November or something like that they put him in and benched Evan Fournier for good. But I also think he could be used as a trade piece, and that's not saying like I want to definitely get rid of Quentin Grimes. No, I don't think Quentin Grimes is a detriment to the team. I think he has value though, and I think that value we could use to our advantage and use him as a trade piece for, quite frankly, a guy that can move the needle for us. Teams have seen what Quentin Grimes does and like that. They like his, his hustle. They like his fast play. They like his, his shooting, obviously, and his defense, all that stuff. Teams like that, and as a Knicks fan, I like that too, and I'm glad he's on the team and I'm glad he's able to contribute, but. Given that he's a young piece, and stuff like that, and that he, is right now at good value, I think if the Knicks really want to make a move for like a superstar player, or even not even like a superstar, just like a decent, and not decent, but like a star level talent at the wing spot, then I feel like Grimes could be a target, and that's not like a bad thing. Obviously, is an NBA player that you would never want to have to get traded, right? But for the Knicks, that could be a better thing. There are good options out there that they can pursue, and you could use Grimes as a way to kind of leverage those teams into wanting to pull the trigger and make that move, right? And if Grimes were to stay on the Knicks, I'll kind of dive into this a little bit. If he were to still be suiting up for the New York Knicks next season, I do think he can take a bigger leap. Getting a mostly full season in the starting lineup definitely gives you confidence a little bit. Obviously, getting benched for a couple games in the playoffs can hurt it a little bit, but I feel like the fact that Tom Thibodeau was able to trust him for 48 minutes is a confidence boost in that self for Grimes alone. I definitely think Grimes can take a bigger leap if he can really just put in the work and kind of improve the three-point shot a little bit. Obviously he shot really well in the regular season, but there obviously are still some flaws in that. Sometimes he's reluctant to take threes, sometimes he's too trigger happy, kind of topsy-turvy with that. If he could just find some consistency with his shot selection and slow down a little bit and kind of play with the pace of the game instead of trying to outpace it, because sometimes he tries to do that. Sometimes he'll play a little too fast, like go in the corner with that baseline drive, go way too fast, and like the person he dumps it off to is just not expecting it. That's not Grimes' fault at times. Sometimes it's the other person's fault, but at the same time, you also want Grimes to kind of just flow with the rhythm of the game and not try to go too fast. He talks really fast too, so I guess he's just a really fast person. But, regardless of that, looking at it from a basketball standpoint, I definitely think Grimes can, really elevate to another level next season if he's still here with us. I definitely can see that. I can see him becoming a big piece, but I also can see him being a trade piece. So I definitely think he's someone with a big question mark above his head for what his role on this team is going to be, if it's going to be on this team at all. So I guess we'll figure that out. But what do you think about all that?
Yeah, I think Quentin Grimes is like the perfect mix of good enough to get traded and be a valued piece, but also good enough that if the Knicks were to keep him around and like invest in his development, they could get pretty good results. Like I wouldn't be shocked if like the Knicks were to trade him in a deal and he goes out and he averages an efficient 16 points a game on good defense, right? Because I just think he's that type of player. We see what he's capable of with greater opportunities, right? And kind of the weird thing is that you feel like he could be an elite level role player, but on the Knicks he can't be much more than that because of the fact that not saying this is a bad thing, of course, but because of course you have Brunson and Randall there, and those guys are better scorers than he is, so they're going to get a higher percentage of looks right now, and you can't really provide that to Grimes. But can he be more aggressive and kind of take more of those those minutes that are up for grabs or those shots that are up for grabs? Absolutely. So interesting to see how that development for him will go, but I agree with you on all your points. It's just a matter of refining his game and getting confidence and kind of seeing, is he an elite level role player, or is he capable of being, a multi faceted type of scorer? Is he capable of doing that consistently? We'll have to wait and see, but he's certainly athletic enough, and he's certainly got the size.
I want to add too, obviously Grimes is still very young. He's only like in his early 20s. I don't know his exact age. I don't have 22. It in front of me, but he's 22. Yeah, so, very, very young. Obviously plenty of time to develop him and stuff like that. So it's not like we're necessarily saying, oh, they need to trade Quentin Grimes. We need to give up on him. No, of course not. He's young. You don't want to do that. But, at the same time, with how much value he has currently, you might want to take advantage of that. This is a team that isn't necessarily looking at the draft anymore and looking for long-term building. This is a team that's ready to win right now. This is a team that's ready to make those win-now moves, ready to make the trade for that big superstar that could thread the needle, or, star player if it's not a superstar. This is a team that's, not really looking to, draft somebody and make them become a significant piece. This is a team that's ready to, maybe use those picks in trades for players that are already established, role star, type players and stuff like that, and just establish themselves as a good NBA player. This is a team that's ready to do that. They just made the second round. They're not just going to, take a step back and go, oh, we made the second round, but, we're back to our building. No, they're like, okay, we made the second round. How do we get better, and how do we get to the Eastern Conference Finals and then the NBA Finals? Those are just some points I wanted to add on that. What do you think?
Yeah, one of the big things that I think you clarified that is important to clarify is that we're not sitting here and begging for him to be traded. It's just that what we have to recognize both possibilities. One, the one where he's on the Knicks, and then the one where he's valued enough to be a part of the bigger trade. And the Knicks aren't going to be afraid to trade him if it's their guy, right? Like, again, I don't think that guy has necessarily become available over the course of the Leon Rose tenure, right? Yes, have there been really high-level players traded? Yeah, but was Kevin Durant ever going to get traded to the Knicks? No. Was James Harden ever going to get traded to the Knicks? No. Were they ever going to get, again, Donovan Mitchell was the guy that they were interested in, but is he the defensive, offensive threat? Is he the two-way wing that this team needs with, a Jalen Brunson type and kind of their lineup and roster construction? Also no. So, that guy hasn't become available for them just yet, that like dream player. So when he does, I imagine Knicks will go all in, but, we'll have to wait and see on that front. But, kind of the one guy that I think is probably the most controversial figure on the New York Knicks right now is Julius Randle. Now, I'm going to say first, the video of people like defacing him at Madison Square Garden, I think is beyond disrespectful. The Knicks aren't in the second round or in a position to be in the second round without Julius Randle. If you thought that this team was going to walk into the first round and knock off one of the 76ers, Milwaukee Bucks, or the Boston Celtics, maybe the Milwaukee Bucks without Giannis, but that's maybe, right? You're crazy, right? The Knicks needed to be the 5th seed. Julius Randle's a huge reason they were the 5th seed, right? Massive reason. It wasn't like the Knicks ran away with the 5th seed. It's like there was a massive gap in wins in the Eastern Conference. If I'm not mistaken, I believe Miami had 3 or 4 fewer wins than we did, and they were the 8th seed. So, there is really no way for me to say this. I'm going to double check this right now. Yeah, the Knicks were 2 games ahead of the Nets for the 6th seed, and they were 3 games ahead of Miami. So had the Knicks the Knicks just lost 2 games here and there. You take away 2 of Julius Randle's phenomenal games, right, that they went on and won. The Knicks get knocked out in the first round. And we're sitting here 2 weeks before today, 3 weeks even before today, talking about the season. Hey, it was a successful regular season. They just got outmatched in the postseason, and we expected that. The Knicks got a postseason that they could actually watch. We actually got a postseason we could watch and compete in, feel the thrill of winning a postseason in, all because the Knicks actually got a first-round matchup they could win. And that is in large part because of Julius Randle. If you want to sit here and say, hey, the Knicks are going to have to maybe look to move Julius Randle for a bigger star if they want to win a finals, that's an entirely different conversation. But if you're going to sit here and deface the guy, if you're going to call him a loser, that he stinks, that you hate him, that this and that, all because of this postseason series, I don't think you understand the value he's had to this team, not just this year, but he also carried the Knicks to the postseason 2 years ago. And I don't think if the Knicks made the postseason 2 years ago, Jalen Brunson would have had any interest in coming to New York. Because then this would have been a team that hadn't made the postseason over a decade. Look, I get it. His dad is Rick Brunson and he works with the Knicks. Do you think Jalen Brunson would only want to play with the Knicks just because his dad is there? Absolutely not. He would have taken a contract with the Mavs, or maybe he would have gone somewhere else. But the Knicks not being horrific over the last 3 years is a big reason why they were able to attract a guy like Jalen Brunson. There have been players of Jalen Brunson's caliber to hit free agency. He's not the first guy to hit free agency of his caliber. And they don't choose to go to the Knicks, and they have no interest in going to the Knicks. So, Julius Randle's played an intrinsic role in this team getting to the point where it is right now. I don't know if you disagree with me in this here, but I feel like it's insane to go from criticizing a guy to, hey, let's deface this guy. We got to write on, trade me and this and that, because he lost and he failed in one instance in the postseason where, yes, it was bad, but he's the only reason why we're here in the first place.
Right. I mean, listen, I understand Randle has struggled in the postseason this season, and he struggled in the postseason in 2021. I get that, and I understand maybe the question is now, can Randle necessarily be the guy on this team? That I understand that is a question. It is something that you have to think about. But it's entirely different to, just think about some simple like that and a basketball move to completely defacing the guy and pretty much making it almost like a personal attack on the guy. This guy is a human at the same time. Okay, this guy's not just some, AI form of entertainment that you watch on TV or when you go to the arena you watch on the court. No, he's a human. Okay, he's not going to be perfect. He was never a perfect NBA player. It's things like that that's just, some Knicks fans are just a little wild with that. I understand there's frustration. I understand we're passionate about our team, but when you're going as far as, take down his poster at MSG and write on it and vandalize it and stomp on it, that's just disrespectful. That's not even at that point. That's not even just like you're just showing out your frustration of a loss. No, that's just being flat out disrespectful to another human being. It's simple as that. I mean, I even said this the other day on Twitter. I don't think any other Knicks player would get this kind of treatment, even if they were an all-star. Like, could you imagine Jalen Brunson, if he had a bad postseason? Would Knicks do this to his poster? Would they stomp on it? Would they write on him? I don't think so. I don't think they would do that. Right? So just looking at that, I mean, like, I understand too, like, Randall has his moments with his attitude or his body language. Sometimes you wonder if he cares at times. I get it. I understand that. But at the end of the day, he's still a very productive NBA player. Still, he's an all NBA level player twice. He's made 2 all NBA teams in the past 3 seasons, and that wasn't by accident. That was because he performed at a high level. So, sometimes he has a rough postseason and it happens. I get it. You want him to contribute more in the postseason, and I get it. You have to wonder now if he should be the guy on this team or not. I understand. Those are serious questions to be answered. I agree with that. But I don't agree with, completely defacing the guy and writing him off as some trash bum or some, non-productive NBA player. That's just not true. He's a big reason why we were even the 5th seed in the first place. Big reason why, we even got as far as we did. You know what I mean? He's the reason he turned this franchise around. And I think we're failing to acknowledge that. He turned this franchise around pretty much on his own. And now he has a budding partner in Brunson. And hopefully, if he's still around next season, he has another budding partner that can really get this team to where it wants to be. So I think we need to acknowledge that, Randall's a big reason why we are in this position. We can't just ignore that. It sucks that, he didn't perform as well as he did in the regular season this postseason. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I totally understand that. I understand he didn't perform at the level we wanted him to perform at. But you also got to realize that this is a human. He's not a robot. He's not going to be perfect. Sometimes teams figure you out. It happens. That's what you have off seasons for. You make those adjustments. You better your game. You sharpen some things that were, not working out for you, and you come out stronger and better next season. Hopefully that is the case. Hopefully Randall doesn't regress. I do think he really put up a statement this season after a rough 2021-2022 season, and then really stepped up this season with an all-NBA level performance, and quite frankly, his best season of his career. So, I have confidence that Randall can really improve next season. I honestly do. I've been very high on Randall all season long. I've always been a big Randall truther. I know some guys don't like Randall. I understand. Maybe you just don't like the player, but don't hate the guy. The guy is not a bad guy whatsoever. Some of these people are writing him off like he's a bad person. Even Kenyon Martin went on the internet on a podcast and got mad at Randall for kissing his wife and kid after a win. Like, why are we getting mad about that? I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. Some things like that make it feel more personal rather than, oh, I don't like Randall the basketball player. No, it feels like you don't like Randall the person. And that's kind of disgusting in my opinion. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I think that I was actually wanted to mention that, right when I finished my segment, I was like, oh man, I forgot to mention that part. Hey, look, you can, again, if we want to criticize a guy for kissing his wife after a playoff win or, in a playoff environment, I think you got to get your priorities in check. I think you got to worry about something else. You got to pick up a hobby. The weather's pretty good. Even upstate here, the weather's pretty good. Go for a walk. Go play some hoops with your friends. I don't know. Figure out something to do because you need a hobby if we're getting obsessed over this. And end of the day, right? Like as you mentioned, it feels like for the longest, it's always been personal attacks on Randall. It's never been like, hey, the dude didn't play well. It's people have never been able to consistently just as a whole be critical without being personal. And another thing that really sucks about all of this is that it wipes away and he had an all-NBA season, right? I believe it's his second all-NBA team, if I'm not mistaken. His second all-star year.
Second all-NBA team. He was third all-NBA team this year. In 2021, he was second all-NBA team, but all-NBA is all-NBA. So
right. Like how many guys outside of Carmelo Anthony in the last 2 or 3 decades for the Knicks, or no, not 2 decades, excuse me, have been twice on the All-NBA team. I don't know if Kristaps got 2. I don't think he did. And then I'm trying to think.
No, he did not.
So it might literally be Carmelo. I'm not even, because of just the depth of the wing position, I'm not even, I think he may have gotten 2, maybe. But think about that. Dude, how many?
It's just like, this is the way I see it. We finally have an all-star, and we're treating him like he's a bum. I don't understand. We've been, this Knicks team has been begging for an all-star level talent for a decade. We thought we had one in Porzingis, and unfortunately it just didn't pan out. Got hurt after one all-star season. It didn't work out. We get a new one in Randall, who has actually got us to the playoffs this time. No disrespect to Porzingis, but we didn't get to the playoffs with him. So we finally get an all-star that gets us this far to where we want to be, to a relevant franchise again, an attractable destination. And this is how we treat him? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't feel right. That's just the way I see it. What do you think?
Yeah, no, and I just confirmed this. Carmelo has had 2 with the Knicks. So it's him and it's Julius Randle. Those are your 2 multi All-NBA players for the New York Knicks, basically in my lifetime, right? Now, is Julius Randle a Hall of Famer the way that Carmelo is? No, I understand that, right? And I love Carmelo Anthony. That the dude was awesome, right? But I think that matters, right? And I think that matters. I think, and as you mentioned, it matters to reach this level of success, right? Again, you can criticize a guy, but you finally get your consistent all-star, and you have him and Brunson put together a magical season together, and they win 53 games. It was, again, the best New York Knicks team since the Carmelo led, when he initially got here, that Knicks team, right? You think of, Knicks tape, think of all that stuff, those fun memories. That's a decade ago, right? I was 8, you know what I mean? I'm 18 now. I was in middle school. I'm in college now, right? I imagine you were in middle school or in elementary school, whatever, that time period. And now you're in college as well. So we've grown up basically our entire lives we've had the majority of our life contain itself between the 2 eras of good Knicks basketball. We finally get, consistently good basketball, and this is how we treat these guys. So I 100% agree with you. The treatment about Julius Randle, the discussion about Julius Randle, it doesn't have to change. We don't have to pretend he didn't have a bad postseason. He did. He had a bad postseason, but we don't have to get personal. We don't have to take this beyond what it needs to be, right? And I think that's how I feel about it. I don't know if you have any final thoughts about Randall, the season in general, anything else you want to mention. But yeah, no, I mean, take the floor.
Right, I don't want to just sit here and, rag on Knicks fans for how they treated Randall these past couple days. It's not how I want to be. We had to bring it up because, it was just, not right to see. It was pretty, quite frankly, disgusting. But, I'm not going to sit here and just rag on people for that. I understand frustration. I'm not excusing that kind of behavior, but I understand there is frustration that boiled over, and hopefully, people will settle down and kind of get a reality check and realize that Randall did get us this far, so we can't treat him like this. But, just to kind of give my final thoughts on the season, it was a great season. Simple as that, great season. We started off the season 10-13, looked like things were going to go downhill, and then from December 4th on, 37-22. Everything changed. When Tom Thibodeau made those adjustments to get Cam Reddish, Derrick Rose, Evan Fournier, all those guys out of the rotation and sub them in with, Deuce McBride, have Jericho Sims play a little bit, give guys like Emmanuel quickly a larger role. Things changed. Tibbs finally, we were wondering all of last season, when was Tibbs going to make the adjustment? When was he going to make the change to get this team better? He did it this season. This season he did. He made that big adjustment that got us to a really good team. Got us to the second round, and then adding Josh Hart really elevated things even more. I don't think it's a coincidence that we go 20-9 with Josh Hart the rest of the way in the season. It's not a coincidence at all. I really was pleased with what happened this season. Really pleased with it. Overall, it was a very fun season. It stinks that it didn't end in a championship, but it's part of the process. You're not going to go straight from not being a good team to a finals team unless you're the Phoenix Suns, but even they didn't win the championship. So just looking at that, I'm really excited for next season. I'm hoping for some major improvements. We'll talk more about offseason additions and what the Knicks should do as this offseason goes along. We're not just going to go away. No, we'll still be here talking about all that stuff. But in terms of the season, it was really fun. I was really fun to talk about, really fun to cover this Knicks team, really fun to talk about all these wins. There were ups and downs, of course, but it was still really fun talking about it. Those are kind of my final thoughts on it.
Yeah, no, overall, it was a fun season. It was an excellent season to get to cover. We really started this podcast right around the time. Actually, funny enough, we started this podcast, I think, right around the time, the Josh Hart stuff happened, and the Knicks really took off. So it was plenty of fun. There was a lot to talk about. There were ups, there were downs. There was the exhilaration of entering the postseason, the exhilaration of winning a postseason series. Watching the Knicks do what they were capable of doing. I know that Game 5 ended up not mattering because the Knicks lost anyways, but that was still an awesome performance to just watch Jalen Brunson runs and go out there and dominate the way he did. Seeing guys like Emmanuel Quickly, Quinn and Grimes, just guys that, not that they weren't good players before, but they were really young role players, find their identity and find their confidence in this league was amazing. And of course, doing this podcast with you was awesome, right? And we're going to continue to do this podcast, of course, but, to close the curtains on what was an incredible season, we want to thank you guys, obviously, on behalf of Dylan, on behalf of all of Fireside Knicks and ESM. We want to thank you guys for tuning into the podcast, whether you watched one episode, whether this is your first episode, whether you watch, this podcast frequently, whether you follow us on our socials, whatever it may be. We appreciate you guys tuning in. We appreciate you guys checking us out. We will do off-season content, obviously. We'll talk about the draft, the lottery, all that stuff. We're going to talk about off-season stuff, whether it's, trade rumors or free agency rumors. And we'll have you guys with content, right? We'll make sure we keep pumping that out, and we hope to continue to grow as podcasters and continue to grow, and hopefully this roster grows with us. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode and for this season. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Again, we're doing much more content after this. This is not the end of Fireside Knicks, just the end of this season. And we appreciate you guys' continued support. You guys can follow our personal Twitter accounts to check out what we've got tweeting and what we've got going on. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. I'm Ryan Garcia signing off for the last time this postseason. This is my co-host Dylan Backer. He's signing off for the last time this postseason. Peace out.